welcome. I would say we start, so we try to be on time and give chance to everyone to speak and present the various cases. Thank you, first of all, to the speakers, and I'm sure we've put together quite an interesting, you'll get quite interesting shots of information on different aspects. Before going into those, some practicalities and information. So this, let's say, substitute what you know was the knowledge market or marketplace in our traditional conferences. And so it's the opportunity to really knowledge exchange and learn from each other. And we have selected some good and interesting case studies. I hope you'll take the chance and take the chance also to connect with the people through this platform, and then go deeper into discussion also as well, because we won't have chance to go into micro details here. But hope this will be inspiring for you all. Yeah, we will be using the chat, of course, to collect questions, input, and any other material we want to share. Presentations will be of about 15 minutes, and we'll give 5 minutes extra for exchange or discussions or questions. We aim to close shortly after 1, so to give you a chance to have a lunch break, and maybe so to us too. And we'll start afterwards with the workshops at 2:30. So just for information, so you know the process. After lunch, we'll give you the link. We'll leave this session open with some videos, so you can follow if you want while having lunch, some other information. But then at the end, you need to connect to another link. I will repeat this at the end. And before I forget, I would invite the speakers if they could share with us their presentations, so we will then make them available for the audience. Having said that, I think I would welcome Christian Altaba, who's director of the Levant Natural Park, and he will be speaking of a challenging topic, wilderness in the Mediterranean, and in an island in particular. So please, Christian, the floor is yours, and I'll stop sharing my screen so you can present.
Okay. Okay. Okay, is this working?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to talk about this, I think, amazing project we are doing here in the island of Mallorca, which is growing protected areas in places where people think that there's really nothing left to be protected, and making them even better in the sense of building a wilderness. So as you can see here, I have a double life. I work for the Department of the Environment, but I also keep my academic life in research in ecology and evolution. So if you think I'm talking about strange things, you are not the only one. Okay, let's see. Now, the Balearic Islands are right in midway between the tropics and the Arctic, and most of you live closer to the boreal zone, so no wonder most of you, not this year, but often come to visit us as tourists. And tourism, of course, is a great business here, but I hope we can do a better job in channeling this force into more productive ways. In the Balearic Islands, we have quite a few protected areas. Here you have hatched those areas that are protected under the Habitats Directive, and in pink, the bird areas. There is a strange situation here because even if we are the most isolated archipelago in the Mediterranean, we do have a transboundary effect because most of these areas, especially the larger ones in open sea, are not managed by the Balearic Island government, but are managed from Madrid. And that is a political problem that brings a lot of problems in everyday conservation work. The park I'm going to be talking about is the Levant Park in the northeastern corner of Mallorca. Was created in almost 20 years ago with a much wider extension than nowadays. After some really sad political moves, over 15 years ago, the park was reduced to these blue and red areas. The red areas are no-go, strict nature reserves. The area, most of it can be visited, of course, is surprising for most visitors because they don't expect to find this wild area in the Balearics. And we have a lot of interesting things here. Of course, being in the Mediterranean means that we have sclerophyllous vegetation and seed dispersal. Even we have the same species as of trees and shrubs. Most of them are in common with other areas in the Mediterranean. For example, the ecology of seed dispersal is very different. So that imposes a lot of problems for our reforestation efforts. We are doing a lot of reforestation because the area had been affected by wildfires in the last 50, 60 years. And also you can see all this red thing down here. These are plants that are using a tropical strategy. They use their leaves in summer, which is something you would never find in the European continent. The area is quite rugged, and basically the idea is to enlarge the park almost as far as the eye can see along the coast. We have some settlements, and these would probably be excluded. But the area has, of course, even if it's sunny when tourists are here, it can become very cold in winter. We do have snow in this mountain area, quite close to the sea, and we have a lot of endemic species. For example, we have this very showy peonian, an endemic species that produces these strange fruits. And even if some people have tried to find who is dispersing these fruits, how the biology of this plant works, we still have no idea. Something that is quite important in the Mediterranean, and I would say in the Balearics especially, is that a lot of the native species have very restricted ranges. So here are 3 examples of species of snails, recently described species, that have very, very restricted ranges. The one on the top right, this is a hairy snail that lives only in a very small stretch of coast, along the coast. On the left, you have a species that has a distribution area of less than 1 square kilometer in a ravine. And bottom right, a spring snail that lives only in a single spring. So when we talk about conservation in the Mediterranean, we are thinking more in almost tropical terms, in that a small landscape alteration would mean a biodiversity crisis globally. As an example, let me show you the Majorcan midwife toad, the species that was fairly recently described. It was known as a fossil, but now of course, it's living, but it is critically endangered. And it is endangered, surviving only in very remote canyons, because since Roman times, we have had snakes introduced. And snakes are especially the water snake here, is a specialist at eating amphibians. And this little species has a smooth skin with no defenses, no behavioral response against predation. So it is extremely sensitive to predation. I think it is very important, especially in an island environment, to disentangle what is native and what is not native, what has come from abroad by people. And this is a paradox that we can see, for example, in our European legislation. We have quite a few species, even endemic species from the Balearics, protected through the Habitats and Birds Directive. But quite a few of these are species that should not be protected in the Balearics. And also we include 4 species that are extinct here. So this is just a showcase of, I would say, legislation incongruences. Among the species that are protected but do not belong here are the pine marten, this is a roadkill, of course, and the terrestrial tortoise, the Mediterranean tortoise. These 2 species are doing quite well in Mallorca, and especially the tortoise, the population here is important in terms of global conservation, but I would say this species should be in the second category. I mean, we have to protect the midwife toad way before protecting this species or spending time protecting this species. Legally, we are bound. Now, the area has a lot of archaeology. The Balearics were settled permanently by people only 5,000 years ago. So most of the, especially the early remains of this occupation occur in this area. We have an amazing archaeological heritage. And well, if this was part of the reason, we would have a lot of films being made here, of course, but perhaps we
Jason, sorry, can
yes?
you reduce a bit the size of your presentation, just because if you make it smaller slightly so we see.
Okay, let's see. Like this. Is it working?
Better.
Okay, even more like this?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. Oh. Now it's not working. Okay. Oh, yes, I have. Now, okay. As a consequence of people coming back and forth through 5 millennia, we have a lot of species that do not belong here, a lot of exotics. And this is something that happens almost everywhere in the world, especially everywhere in the Mediterranean, but here we can assess it carefully. This is the common garden snail, which is widespread, at least in Western Europe, but it is a native of Sicily that in historical times was introduced everywhere. In the Balearics, we have over a third of the land snail species that have been introduced. It's a smaller percentage than you have in European continental areas, such as Iberia, certainly less than in oceanic islands, such as the Canaries. This, of course, imposes quite a stress on conservation. How we know this is because, of course, in the case of snails, they leave their shells. So we can go from the earliest record we have in the lower part of the screen and all the way to the present. And you can see more or less when species became introduced. We are experiencing now a faster than ever arrival of exotic species because of increased transportation, commerce, tourism. When we look at plants, we see some anomalies. For example, in the left, we have this endemic species, a little plant. You see it is virtually untouched by insects. It is extremely poisonous. most of the endemic plants are either very poisonous or very spiny. And they survive basically because feral goats keep other species at bay. Now, goats were introduced by these early settlers, and you can see here in this map places where we had this kind of feral goats in the Mediterranean. In Italy, we have only one population surviving in Monte Cristo. We have these feral goats from the island of Majorca, and then we have some the Agrimi in Greece. This is a line of early goats that is very different from all the other domestic or wild goats. But this species, of course, came much later than the evolution of these plants. So we have a species missing, and this is this extinct ungulate. It was very abundant until, say, just 3,000 years ago, and between 3,000 and 5,000 years ago, this was a very powerful herbivore. And well, the question might be, are goats doing more or less what this species was doing? Well, we can make a model of insularity, how island dweller is the species. So we can make this model. Just take a look at the vertical axis, that is the insularity index. So on top of the, above zero, we have species that are island dwellers. And you see the first one is the Aletes moletensis, that's the Majorcan midwife dove. Then you have the dodo, then you have this extinct endemic species. And below zero, you have all these truly continental species, which are basically invasive species, many of them, such as rats and zebra mussels. So I think that this graph tells us something very useful for conservation. We talk about connectivity and fragmentation of habitats a lot, and that is very interesting, but that is useful in continental settings. In island settings, I think we have to strive for keeping isolation as it was before. So goats are not exactly what we would like to have, but that's the herbivore we have, and we must manage them very carefully and very intensively. There is a traditional way of catching the goats with lace, and that sort of works. And it's people use trained dogs, so that's what goats understand. But we have to keep culling them, and we kill hundreds of animals every year. It's a very complicated, very delicate issue also for public relations. We also have this ever increasing arrival of exotics. For example, this South American moth, which is a very rare species in northern Argentina, southern Paraguay, became introduced with introduced palm trees, and now it's threatening this native palmetto trees. I will give a hint of this later on. This is one of the many problems we have. Of course, in the Mediterranean, we have a problem, which is wildfires. This is an example of a fire that, of course, all fires are ignited by people, one way or the other. And in this case, you can see on the left, had the original situation, a very dense littoral forest with a lot of vines. In spite of being under a heavy summer drought, it retained a lot of moisture in the soil.
Listen, sorry.
Yes?
You've used 16 minutes, huh?
Okay.
So
okay.
just to alert you.
Thank you. So
Sorry.
here you see how bad forest wildfires can be. So this means we cannot even, we cannot leave things alone. When we talk about rewilding, this of course doesn't mean we don't have management. We do have a lot of agriculture, active agriculture within the park, and all this we have translates into some conservation success. The red kites, the black vultures, and the Balearic primrose are species that are recovering. This little plant was on the verge of extinction, only 9 individuals a few years ago. Now it's doing more or less. We have a lot of outreach and a lot of visitors. And well, the idea was to basically set the time machine so we can have in the no-go areas, we can go as far as we can, say 5,000 years ago, and then we would have these different zones of protection. Also, of course, we have to consider the sea, and we have different species of seabirds that became the focus of attention initially. These are species that are doing reasonably well, but diminishing. We also have a number of amazing invertebrates, typically Mediterranean species. These are still relatively common gastropods, but of course they are collected by people. We know very little about the cetaceans. We do have a few species, and we have a very interesting deep water benthos with coralligenous formations. There's a very unspoiled, untouched bottom, which is something really exceptional in the Mediterranean. Not everything is doing well, of course. Red coral is taken by people traditionally, and a lot of poaching. And on the right, in this Posidonia meadows, you can see the fan shell, which is a species that was very common just 3 years ago and is now almost extinct by, I would say, almost mysterious reasons. Probably has to do with what we're doing to the ocean. So we do a lot of outreach. We have an education team which is very active, and we ask people locally what is their opinion of the management we're doing, including their perception. And the vast majority said it's good or very good. So this is what we managed to get from politicians. This is the current state, legally approved enlargement of this park. We are going to be about 15 times bigger. I would like to make it 20, 25 times bigger. But this is what we're going. And you look at the little figure, we asked local people how they viewed this project, and 90% say it's good, very good, or excellent. And only 4% were really against it, and basically for partisan reasons. So here are some other objective indicators of our future success, I hope. So we have to reintroduce species that are critically endangered, such as the Balearic shearwater, the Mediterranean monk seal, and the sea turtles. Well, sea turtles might come back. They're coming back fast. And also we are very active in recovering traditional culture. These are the fibers of the palmetto tree, which is part of an artisan activity that was almost forgotten. And basically the idea is that we cannot protect nature if we don't involve these people, and we cannot give a reasonable life to these people without protecting this nature. So this is our project, and I, of course, would be very happy to interact with anyone interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Christine, for those also beautiful views of the Balearic. And yes, for sure, the increase of extension of protected areas is one of the challenges ahead of us. Yes, if you can stop sharing. Thank you. Please feel free to use the chat if you want to exchange with Christian and get in touch. And I would move to the second presentation of today of this session with Alberto Arroyo, who's Senior Manager at the IUCN. And he will be speaking about inclusive conservation in protected areas, and an interesting project. So Alberto, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Federico. This is a very good opportunity, actually, I think, to present what we are doing in relation with protected areas management. I believe that this is probably the best audience for our project, because this is the kind of tool that we hope can be useful for at least some of you in the management practices that you might have. I have a short presentation also that might help here. Let me start with it. This is the part of the technical challenge, but should be okay quickly. Okay, I think you can see my screen now. Yes. So I'm going to speak about inclusive conservation. This is what Federico was saying. Yes, probably we are all aware of the different ways of managing protected areas, and inclusive conservation is maybe the new kid on the block. It's a new concept. Probably is not, at this point, we all know all the different ways of doing this management, and probably is not something revolutionary, but it's a way to try to put together all the different ideas to ensure that we take care of the different visions of the different stakeholders in a systematic way and with some tools that I think might be helpful. This is part of a project. I'm not sure that I want to read all the information here, but just to let you know that there is a large number of partners, including a large number of universities. And also, by the way, this is not only European, it's also from the States. We are also working with protected areas there with Denali. It's a national park in Alaska, and the University of Illinois is also working with us. Well, what is inclusive conservation? This is the official definition, if you want. I'm going to read it because I think it can help, but I will go after with some of the details that I think will be more interesting. So inclusive conservation is a transdisciplinary approach to balancing stakeholder visions. That's the crucial point here, the visions of the different stakeholders, and promoting shared agreements for the future management of protected areas. It involves developing and applying inter and transdisciplinary tools and processes to identify, compare, and balance the consequences of different visions for how nature should be conserved. Well, it's a long and probably not that easy to remember. The key word here probably is visions and sharing and stakeholders. The idea is to have some tools to understand how these visions look like and to try to find ways to balance them. There is a number of different components in this work towards inclusive conservation. The idea is to consider all these multiple visions for protected areas management, to assess the consequences of each of these visions, to have some social learning, which includes some discussions with stakeholders. Social learning is not only for the project or for the managers, it's for social, for everybody participating, and to try to collectively define new visions. After finally we assess the uncertainty and we try to build resilience, and we finally acknowledge the power relations and rethink the governance, even if needed. We try also, by the way, and this is also interesting in these times that policy, biodiversity policy is so active and so much changing. As you know, we have a new EU biodiversity strategy, and very soon we will have also a new global framework for biodiversity in the context of the CBD. Well, these times are very important also to ensure that all the different new developments are also, and we ensure that are part of the discussions in the decision making, because this is going to shape the future framework for protection of biodiversity for the next 10 years. And in the context of this project, we also try to ensure that this is part of it. As you know, or maybe you are more familiar also with the discussions at international, but also at EU level, we are not achieving the biodiversity targets. And one of the reasons is the fact that the rest of the actors, let's say not the conservation sector, but other sectors, are not that much behind the goals. So one of the important parts of the future achievement of the biodiversity targets is to ensure the inclusivity and to ensure that we can make sure that these targets are owned by the different sectors. Therefore, anything in relation with inclusivity is very relevant for the upcoming years. And therefore, the project that we are dealing with on inclusive conservation of protected areas is also relevant in the context of the policy discussion. Well, as I mentioned, we have different areas that we are working on. 3 of them are European, one in Sweden, one in the Netherlands, one in Spain, Madrid, where I am from, and another one in the United States, as I mentioned, in Alaska. They are also extremely different in terms of different levels of wilderness, let's say IUCN categories. So Denali is very close to category 1, Sierra de Guadarrama can be 2, 4, and Sweden and the Utrecht case, both of them are category 4 or 5. So these are some of the results. I think that this is the most interesting part of it. This is a snapshot of some of the results from Utrecht, from the Netherlands case, the Dutch case. And here you see some of the results from the questions that were asked to different stakeholders. What matters when envisioning the future of landscapes in my region? And you see here different values: intrinsic values like biodiversity, existence values, instrumental values such as recreational values, aesthetic values, agriculture, and relational values, more related with stewardship or social responsibility, etc. So there is a big variety here of values, and this is important for the next map that I will show you in a while. But before I get into that, how this information was collected was through a tool called Streamline, which is a method to make interviews, and it's a way to make it interactive and very easy to understand for any kind of stakeholder. I'm only putting here some ideas of how this looks like. As you see, this is a simple picture of the different aims that people could have. After, there is also a part of the discussion that is about how do you imagine the future with a map in front of you, and even you go to specific areas to understand, well, this is how I will imagine that the things could look like in future, specifically in this area. And there are questions in relation with what you will like, what you will not like, or what you are not really that much bothered about. At the very end, you collect very detailed information of how different stakeholders understand the area and understand the future of the area. So these are some of the preliminary results. I insist that we are speaking still about preliminary results, but this is just a methodology for now, what we are presenting, that can be helpful for the management of protected areas. So this is in Sweden, and you see here in the top left map, these are the biodiversity impacts in relation with the relational values. So this is how the different values relate with each other geographically. So at the very end, what you have is a map of the different interactions between the different values, and you can identify where there can be, I don't want to call it conflict, but challenges. So this way you can start to focus your measures or your action in different areas and in different topics according to what you have identified as a potential. I insist that the word conflict is never a good one, but challenges that you can find in the area. This is again another example. This is from the Dutch case. The Dutch case is very close to the city of Utrecht. You can imagine that the influence from the city is huge. And here what you see is simply in a map the different conflicts, let's say, that can be found according to the information that it has been collected and according to the area. So you see there, very close to the city, you have this visitors versus residents discussions. Just below it, tranquility versus roads versus recreation versus residential. So there are a lot of different values there. A little bit more down below in the center, agriculture versus climate change. At the very end, as I said, what you have is a map of the different areas where the different conflicts might arise and where you should focus your efforts. So I'm getting to the end because I also think that it will be interesting to get any kind of question or discussion from your side. Now, I collected some information of why I think this could be relevant for you as protected areas management. Well, as said at the beginning, one of the key points here, and we all know it very well, is the necessity to extend and to broaden the stewardship of protected areas. So the ownership of the goals. So the stakeholders' visions here are fundamental to consider, and at least to have clear, if it's not possible to have all the different conflicting maybe or challenging to put together or to make compatible goals, at least to be aware of them and to take measures with it. So the idea is to integrate all the multiple visions for growth, development, and the conservation of the protected areas. At the very end, we want to achieve socially relevant, economically productive, and environmentally sustainable outcomes in the protected areas. That's the ideal goal. One of the deliverables, anyway, that will be, I think, more useful and interesting probably for you, because it's a little bit more practical, is a decision-making toolbox for inclusive conservation. It's being developed at the moment, and it will be ready by mid next year. And it will include all the information for the experiments and the case studies that we have been running and we are still running, such as, for example, the use of Streamline, as I mentioned before, the futures workshops or different ideas of how to collect all this different information into a map. All this will be available very soon in the context of Envision. And to conclude, I'm sure that you're familiar with the Panorama Solutions website, which is a platform to share information about successes and solutions, more than successes, solutions. because not always it's easy to get to a perfect success, but solutions related with conservation. And in particular, for protected areas, there is a lot of information there. So we are going to add all the information from Envision, is being added at the moment, into the Panorama Solutions website. It's very easy to reach it. You see it below here, panorama.solutions, and there you will have all the information from this project. And by the way, for many, many other examples of protected areas, solutions that can be helpful. And with this, I am concluding, and I was trying to actually add a Dumbo here before we started, because this is the flying elephant session. I understand that the whole idea here is to be bold and think in the impossible. But unfortunately, Disney is not very easy to go ahead with to get a copyright. So I simply say thank you very much. Happy to have any question from your side.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you for your inputs and for this interesting project. And yeah, it's quite new challenges ahead of us, and I hope that this stimulates some thoughts and ideas also from our audience. I see Nicoleta had specific questions concerning COVID and the implications of your research. I guess you can see the chat if you want to.
Yes, yes, it's a very good question, and actually it is a big challenge. We are adapting to it, I guess, like everyone of us in all of our work. For example, for the very direct work, the field work, such as collecting information, well, it has been very challenging in some cases. In the particular case of Spain, you can imagine that it was not the best moment to have personal interviews. Also, in terms of the organization of a number of workshops, we are postponing them. Some of them are being virtualized, which is difficult to say if this is the best way forward for this kind of discussions. Honestly, it's also an opportunity for research and to see how this can really affect or not the information collected. But it's being a challenge, I guess, like it is for all of us in these strange times.
Any other questions? Please feel free to also raise your hands or jump into the conversation. Do you think the use of other methodologies that already exist in your project? Sorry, Stefania was asking. So Stefania, you can please.
Yes, hi, good morning. No, my question was about if you are thinking in the project to use the experience also about integration of the vision of stakeholders, etc., coming from other methodologies, because indeed there are already a lot of tentative, no, to have this kind of approach. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Stefania. Yes, actually at the very beginning there was a scoping exercise to check anything that exists. Obviously, there are lots of things that are going in this direction, as we know. Yes, I can say that there is an attempt to try to put together all this information, but the tools that are being used are the tools that are being used and the ones that are being tested. So it's just, if you want, they are considered and they are listed, and they are, of course, not ignored if you want. Now, the tools that are being used here, such as this one that I mentioned, Streamline, and all these kind of interviews and the futures workshops, they are the ones that are being tested in particular. I see also a question here from Marianne about if this is a European funded research. Yes, partly. This is Biodiversa, which I'm sure you are familiar with, and it includes EC funding, but there are also other funding sources, such as the Belmont Forum.
And Nicoleta, if you want to jump in, please.
No, I just want to say, I think I was supposed to attend one of the workshops in Envision that was cancelled in Sweden. But it's nice to meet someone else, because I have only spoken to the people from Sweden. There are a lot of common elements with Fidelio, and we have discussed whether the two projects can combine data, because we are also interested in values. So I will be in touch, in the next month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, Chris Raymond unfortunately could not be here today, but he will have been happy for sure to hear this. So I will make sure that he received the message.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. We see good connections being established also among projects and valuing different experiences. And I just was wondering, all those processes, do you think there's then the capacity in terms of time from the managers to implement all those nice processes? Because we were discussing the sessions just before, and all those are very interesting. But when I put myself in the perspective of a manager who's dealing with other things, obviously there will be benefit in putting in settings those kind of processes, but it's quite time demanding resources. So I'm just devil advocate here, and what's your view on this?
Yeah, you are right that this, of course, requires resources and capacity. One could wonder also, thinking in all the conflicts that arise during the lifetime of the management of a protected area, what is the best time investment, of course? It is after something that will require a lot of time to deal with all the different challenges that arise. If from the beginning, at least you have the information of where this could come from, all the different conflicts, and even maybe tackle some of them, or at least start the discussion to try to fix them, well, maybe the time is well invested. But yes, this is also always a challenge. I fully understand your question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alberto. And I will close the discussion here. Please feel free to stay on chat also, and also to connect with Alberto and the other speakers anytime after the session. And speaking about, sorry, yes, please.
Just the last thing, because unfortunately I'm going to need to leave in about 10 minutes, but my colleague Barbara is in the chat. And in any case, you have my contact details if needed to contact me in future. Thanks.
Thanks again, Alberto. And speaking about conflicts, and I would like to, and solving the conflicts and addressing them possibly ahead, I would like to introduce Kai Elmauer from the Elmauer Institute, and he's working with the Life Euro Large Carnivore project, and he will be showing us a case of moving from conservation intent to really collaborative action and approaches. So Kai, you have the floor, 20 minutes.
Thank you so much for that. So before I really get started on this one, so I was really interested in your presentation, Alberto. I think what you're showing here is really good in sync with what we are experiencing in our work too. So looking forward to some exchange on this one. I do think I share my screen with you. I do think I have a couple of questions still in my career, so 20 years or something. I haven't solved all of these questions yet, but I'm very interested basically in understanding how people make decisions, how groups make decisions, or how governments make decisions, mostly on environmental issues. So this is what the conversation today will be about in this presentation, just checking that you can properly see it. Is the screen visible?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Okay. So I want to talk about the Project Life Euro Large Carnivores as one of the showcases. So one of the examples we're working in, going through that, but also pulling in some other experiences we had along the way. And I'm open to say where we are still sometimes wondering what's going on. So this is a presentation that I present on behalf of a whole group of people. I'm going through that project first. You are seeing the Life Euro Large Carnivore project scope, the geographic scope, 16 countries. So roughly going from Portugal to Ukraine and from Scandinavia down to Italy, covering a lot of ground, different cultural contexts, different ecological contexts, a lot of different ideas and usually the same challenges, because it's not so much about the large carnivores which we are focusing on. Its focus is on bears, wolf, lynx and wolverine. The focus also is on people, and the people seem to be the same across the continent. We have 16 partners that we are working with. World Wildlife Fund Germany is the lead. There's a whole lot of those big organizations. Everyone knows World Wildlife Fund. There's a similar Italian partner in there, Eliante, different name, same sort of organization. There's a German partner, Forstliche Versuchsanstalt, is a research institution from one of the state forest organizations. They are doing interesting stuff on policy and development of these things. And Elmauer Institute, and I guess no one knows Elmauer Institute. So I'll take a minute to quickly give you a bit of context on that in a moment. First of all, before we go into that, I'll give you a bit of a context for what does the project do. The project lifetime is 2017 to 22, a couple more years to go. We are working on about a dozen different actions. Some are in preparation of the core actions. Some of the actions are not totally aligned with the other ones. Some are sort of standing on their own. And two actions that I will focus on in this presentation today is the actions B5 and B6. They are basically a one-step, two-step approach. The first B5 is about increasing communication capacity, so helping local people, conservation actors, that is the managers of large carnivores who make decisions, to better get consensus. So coming from conflict, I prefer speaking about the positive side. That would be the consensus, getting to some agreement, getting to some collaboration. How do you do that? That was the training in B5. And then in the second step, this is B6, we actually help implement these ideas that they came up with, and where they found some good ideas in the training. We help them implement that over the next 2 years in the project. There is a couple more of the technical things like communication, monitoring, and project management. Just the usual things in a live project. I guess you all are familiar with these. So skip that. Now, going back to the smallest partner here, this is Elmauer Institute. So 4 of us, a really small group. I've been trained. I hold a degree in forest science from the University in Munich. I came to a place in my life when I couldn't solve the problems anymore, so I have a formal training added as a mediator. My colleagues are mediators and facilitators as well. So we have this special training in how conflict shapes people's thinking and behavior. We have a background usually in biology or some related areas. And we have a passion, or we have a really strict focus. We are just working on nature conservation issues or initiatives or sustainability issues. That's just our interest. We are not working in all the areas where you would find conflict, but in that narrow lens. 3 of us are actually working in the Euro Large Carnivore project, myself, Eva Maria, and Karin as well are involved in this project. Quickly going, a last thing, I'm calling in from the west coast of Canada. I'm sitting on Vancouver Island these days. The pandemic locks me down here. Coming back to the question of the pandemic, I think it greatly affects our work in the project, and it is a real barrier for getting to collaboration in some ways. So I'll touch on that a bit later, and I'm happy to take any questions on that. Just picked it up before. I often have to talk about situations with people in different places of the world, North America, Europe, not so much difference there, about what's not working. When you have conflict and you want to get to collaboration, you want to have your audience, your focus group, to do certain things. People resort to the 3 known basics, and that's first increasing knowledge. If people would only know something, the hope is that they would do something different. And when that fails, then really working on the attitudes, I've been spending years of my life on that too, in Austria helping with the recovery of the Austrian or the Alpine brown bear population. We tried to change attitudes to a degree we were successful. We changed the attitudes, but we didn't change the behavior. And that led me to this other path of, okay, what else is missing here? And I want to talk about these things today. And the third thing, I didn't go there in Austria, I didn't go there in my project, but I've seen it in some places. A lot of people, when they fail with knowledge and attitudes, they resort to pressure. That could be either resorting to fines and payments that people have to make, or social pressure to resolve conflict. I would advise that all these three things have some place where they can be successful in a certain context. But if you're resorting to those as sort of the silver bullet, the only thing you do, you have a very narrow chance of success. So probably not enough to think about those three. I want to expand your thinking a bit on this. And in this short time of 15 minutes, I only want to take three ideas here. The first one, instead of trying to convince people all the time and make them believe that bears are great, which I think that way, but I don't think I have to convince anyone, not in my family, not in my neighborhood, that bears are great, to make them do things I know are important to be done for bears conservation. So I rather would suggest, let's talk about framing as a way to build conditional support for the things we need. A second one, and that might come across fairly strange, I would suggest that we should work with bias a lot in our projects. Bias is a technical term for me. It's just taking advantage of predictable tendencies in our behavior or in our understanding how memory forms. And those things are pretty helpful if you use them, utilize them. The third one to focus on in this presentation is adding more focus on the positive action. So doing something that we really want to get done is not talking about the things that need to stop. It's talking about and influencing those things that need to happen. So increasing the desired behavior as the goal. That's the third idea here. And I walk you through my next slides to give more context for these ideas. The first one, close to me in the Canada office in Vancouver, you might know that picture on the left side. It's when you fly in on a float plane. That's Vancouver, the downtown core. In the background, you have seen that in the Olympic Games in Vancouver is the North Shore Mountains. That's how the cameras usually picture that in the wintertime. When you take the satellite image on the right side, it's showing you similar area. So basically that is Vancouver. On the top end of this picture, you find the North Shore Mountains. The North Shore has a substantial settlement on there. It's the slope down to the water, where we have a lot of people. The communities are called West Vancouver and North Vancouver. Technically not the same municipality, but it's a big mess of people, roads, and houses. And in that mix is a lot of black bears. Black bears are fairly common here. We have the odd grizzly bears, but we have a lot of black bears, and about 3 or 4 dozen are killed each year because they come into the city from the green space into these cities, the neighborhoods. They eat garbage. It's the #1 attractant in the diagram that you see in the middle of the picture here. It's the red part of the diagram. That is the attractant garbage that brings bears into the city, and then they are killed because they are perceived to be a risk to safety. And conservation officers move in, take those bears out, and it won't take long that another bear takes its place and gets into the same garbage. What we try to do is to change that behavior of people managing their garbage cans, having them out in the night or having them accessible in the backyard, and change that. And we've been working on that topic quite a bit. I've been in an organization in that area to help with that. And there was one big insight that I want to use today as a food for you. The insight was that not everyone cares about black bears in Vancouver. although we are all thinking we are environmentalists at heart, there's a lot of people who are feeling like they are environmentalists, but they don't care about bears. And so there are even other people who are, from their cultural background or just their life experience, they are rather thinking that a dead bear is actually a good thing. So one killed bear would be a progress for them. And then you're looking at that situation, you ask those people to manage their garbage, to take it away, to lock it away, to invest some money into garbage cans that are more bear resistant so they can't open it that easily. That's not going to work, because for them, bears are either not important enough to make that investment, or bears are like, less bears are better. And so what we found here is we need to use a different frame. And when we looked through the options we found one really good one. A common ground that we found is the health concerns of all the residents, all the people living in Vancouver. Because everyone wants to be healthy, and no one wants to be rats, which are associated with disease, at least in our minds. No one wants to be in a city with rats. We better talk about rats in Vancouver and not about bears. So when you talk about rats, the benefit of that will be that people better manage their garbage. We have an increased behavior change. And most likely, with that behavior change, we'll achieve the goals that we have for the North Shore black bears. But the way to do that is changing the messaging, to use a frame that really affects people, that really pulls people in. And that's my first food for thought for you. Use a frame that works with your people, not with you as a project manager, not with your colleagues as a Euro large carnivore project partners. It needs to work with these people out there who are doing things that you want to change. I'm switching to my next topic here. An interesting exercise in this project has been to go through these ideas of bias in the context of managing large carnivores in Europe. And most people react to bias as something, oops, that's dirty, you don't want to have that. And I have to break the truth to you. We all have bias, we are people, we are human. We are pretty much hardwired, we are predictable. And we call that a tendency or bias as a technical term. And it's nothing to be ashamed about. It's something to be self-aware about. And actually to use that and build on that to the benefit of your project goal. I'll take one bias that's just a nice one and very prevalent in our projects around large carnivore conservation or protected areas management. It's called the ultimate attribution error. There's a couple of those biases that look at how we describe groups, understand groups, or perceive groups' behavior. And that specific one, the ultimate, is the tendency to make an internal attribution to an entire group instead of the individuals. So the typical thing, and even in our project, Euro large carnivores, you'll find that very often, is we say things like, a beekeeper has a problem with bears, or beekeepers have problems with bears. And that's ignoring the variance in opinions of beekeepers on bears. That's too much of a simplification to actually manage these questions in front of us. So instead of that, I would suggest that we look at the diagram below, and it tells you a fictional story of a situation X that would support any action set. And it might be, should we shoot that bear when he does this? Or it might be, should we put up fences around sheep? Or it might be something else. And there's two groups, group A and B. And what we actually hear very often in our conversations to make it easier to talk about things is that we just look at the median or the average or something in the middle of these distribution curves and say, a beekeeper does a thing like the blue line and another group does a thing like the purple line. Now, the real thing and the interesting opportunity that you can discover when you're looking deeper is when there is a distribution curve and not just a single opinion of a whole group of people, then actually you will find that between these different groups, and I'll take conservationists and hunters as just a one of the examples. Conservationists would be the blue distribution curve on some action, and the hunters would be the purple distribution curve. People would say they have distinct opinions, distinct perspectives. Yeah, that's true for sure if you look at the median and the average maybe, but if you're looking at the distribution curve, then you'll find that most of those people have some common ground, some overlap area of interest and ideas that you can work with. And that's the green dotted line between them. So that's the area of opportunity, the common ground you can build some action on to get to some behavior or collaboration. Yeah, people agree this could be done, this would make sense. And that is only possible if you are stepping away from this ultimate attribution error that a whole group of people would think the same way. When in reality, we all think mostly conditional on any sort of situation that it depends whether we support something or not. And it might be that our support is waning if there's a specific context that's moving or that's changing. And so that's the idea number two. Work with this bias and take all the variety in front of you to work through these opportunities.
Sorry, Kai, you have reached the time, so 15 minutes already. So just for you,
that
an alert.
Perfect.
An alert.
That's perfect. So I should speed up. Thank you. Okay. So this is my third idea, and I'll race you through this idea, and it's pretty complex. So if there's a lot of questions after that, I'm happy to take them either in this conversation or after. So saying there's a lot of things coming as you look for the avalanche. In the 80s, Isaac Asian developed an idea of how does behavior form. It's called the theory of planned behavior. And basically he's saying there's attitudes and subjective norms that regulate what groups think they should be doing or not doing. And there's a perception on control, the three left bubbles, that form some sort of intention, and from the intention forms behavior. That's his model. And it's been a really important groundbreaking model that he built. What we found and what I found in working with bears in the Alps, or with people around bears in the Alps, large carnivores or protected areas, something's not quite working between the intention and behavior. Something is amiss here. And so I want to introduce another food for thought idea here, that something is a bit more like complex around that. And this is the model I propose to talk about and think about when we are looking at changing people's behavior, changing what people do. That we have the self as basically the Asian model. Then we have a social environment around us that influences what we're actually doing. Even if we think ourselves we should do A, maybe we do B because our friends do B. And the physical environment that plays into that. And I'll give you a really quick shot at this one here. When you're uncovering more of the details around that, you find in the self, again, the Asian model, that model of planned behavior, I think that has a merit that we want to keep that. There is this self-identity knowledge, behavioral intentions pieces around that. There are values that we work on, attitudes that are similar to that. And we want to add some more layers to it, or basically filters around that, social spheres around that influences the behavior that actually forms. It's the relationship that we have with other groups. It's the feeling of belonging to some groups. You're not thinking of doing something because the other group does that. Sometimes it's adversarial, sometimes it's friendly, and you're doing something that the other group does because the group does it. There are social norms at play. Plus, think about another layer around that, that's the physical environment that triggers some of those things, or enforces that, or even hinders them in the contrary, where you say behavior doesn't show up, although you had the intention, or behavior does show up, although you didn't have the clear intention to do that. And that's called, we talk about the clues and the signals from the physical environment. I take you very quickly through that. I just take you through two examples at the very end. The good news about this model here, it looks really confusing at the beginning, but it has some logic in there that basically to every of these entities, the elements of the model, you have some intervention you can use to influence what's coming out as a behavior. For example, convenience is a big predictor of behavior. If it's easy to do, it's going to be done. If it's hard to do, it's really not likely that it's going to be done. Think about collecting garbage or something like that. So the easier you can make it, the better it is. Design is the intervention to look at convenience. So I think there's a lot of things, potential interventions, and the basic idea is that you play these interventions as a piano. It's not just hitting one intervention and trying to change the world with it. It's playing a whole music, a piece of classical music on a piano, and you're hitting several keys to get the outcome that you want. You have to test that in some way, and I'm going to talk about that for days if you don't stop me, so I'll stop right here. One example might be thinking of parks, a very common thing. You want to keep people on trail. So what would be a combination of things you could do? Certainly you can do signage. We see signs all over, and sometimes I feel like I see too many signs. I would have likely a better feeling sometimes if we would have more like effect and less signs. What we find being very effective is the convenience piece around design, like a bridge over a little river or a little water stream that helps people to stay on the trail, or at least at the bridge, be on the trail. And in addition, you might use something like social diffusion. You make the people the owners of the idea. You bring them in as a solution, and you work with them. That picture is from the Munich area, where we helped to establish a new protected area against the backlash from criticism from residential neighborhoods that walk their dogs in the area. So basically, we made them the owners of the new idea that it's going to be a protected area, and they own it, and they have some responsibility for that. That's social diffusion. So that was a really quick rush through that, and I apologize for like the density of it, but I wanted to present the idea. And let's switch to the questions that you might have on anything. So what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much, Kai, and thank you for your for sharing this and your perspective. And I think those elements are quite interesting, as you said, and they're not just for large carnivore issues, but really approaches that we need to consider all over. We don't have really much time for questions unless there's anything really burning. Can you stop sharing screen? So...
I do stop sharing screen. I see one on bias. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yes, if you want to take that one on bias.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that the key to things is when you're using certain keywords, and you often trigger some reaction with that, and predictably, when you're talking about the negative side of things like conflict, then you get less positive response in terms of I'm open to work with you, I'm open to reconsider my things, I'm open to change my behavior. It's better to talk about something that really is of interest to the audience that you're working with, or the partners you're working with, and that might be users of a protected area, might be something else, but really to understand what is important for them is the first thing. So that's where you need to have questions before you have advice or input. And I think that is one of the big lessons, that we don't listen enough. We talk too much. We try to influence. We try to convince people instead of asking them the question, how do you see things? What is your idea on this one? And asking an open question and allowing people to have a different opinion opens the floor for collaboration. So that is a good question, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. And yes, this all those points are also connecting somehow with our next speaker, who's Nicoletta Jones from the Cambridge University, and she will be speaking about increasing public acceptance for protected areas in the context of the biodiversity strategy. So please, Nicoletta, welcome.
Just start sharing my screen. Okay. Hi everyone, so I'm Nicoletta Jones from the University of Cambridge. I'm a principal researcher. I'm based at the Department of Land Economy, but I'm also part of the University of Cambridge Conservation Research Institute. I'm also leading a project which is about social impact of protected areas, and it's nice to see some people that we collaborate who are already in let's say, the room today. So I'm not on my own. I have added a few more people who we work together in Fidelia. So today I'm going to very briefly describe what we do in Fidelia and open the discussion for potential collaborations with other parks. I'm going to briefly say why public acceptance is important, the aims of a project, Fidelia. I'm going to present brief results from 3 of our case studies, and this at the end to discuss some new tools we have developed and about future research. So what is public acceptance? Obviously we use different terms. You can have public acceptance, public acceptability. At the end of the day, it's roughly the same thing. It is usually expressed through either someone participating in voluntary activities like litter picking in a national park, or when they are in the park, they are a responsible user. So for example, not to barbecue when or where it is not permitted. Why is it important? Because it is for protected areas, it is important that they are accepted by users, because if there's a low level of acceptance, that can lead to behaviors that damage biodiversity. So for example, people leaving trails and just wandering around in areas where they shouldn't be. It can result to a lot of paper parks. So I come from Greece, which is a country which I have experienced, let's say, paper parks myself. Conflicts emerge between stakeholders, and often we have protests. So now we have this new EU biodiversity strategy, which sets a very ambitious target of new protected areas, but also of new tools of, for biodiversity conservation that require a high level of public acceptance in order to be effective. One question that someone might ask is public acceptance by whom? And I would say by all users of protected area, including both visitors and locals. So what do we do in the Fidelia project? It is a project funded by the European Research Council, so it is very much a research project. However, I was from the beginning very keen to make connections with park authorities directly, so the results of our research are useful for parks around Europe. The project started about a year and a half ago, and we are going to finish in the summer of 2024. The key objectives are to understand which are the key factors that influence the level of acceptance for protected areas in Europe, understand how people's perceptions for protected areas change through time and space. And then something that we didn't actually expect to happen was COVID. We rely a lot on collecting social data. So for us, that has had a major impact. So we have created a new research strand, which is a response basically to the parks we have already collaborated, where basically we explore how COVID-19 has impacted local communities and how parks can manage overcrowding incidents now that we have to social distance, basically, even in open spaces. So we have completed our research in 7 protected areas, and we're now at the second stage of the project, where basically we're starting work in additional 10 protected areas. The aim is to have about 19 to 20 research areas in the next, by the end of the 3rd year of the project. The methods we use in order to capture public acceptance and the factors that influence public acceptance are through personal interviews, structured questionnaires, and workshops. Obviously, initially the plan was to do everything face-to-face. Now we have had to compromise and do some online things. In today's presentation, I'm going to present some very quick results from 3 areas: the National Park of Eastern Macedonia and Thrace in Greece, where we have collected data from 280 locals. Sighisoara Trnava Mare, which is a Natura 2000 site in Romania, and the Peak District National Park, where we had to do an online survey because COVID happened, so we were not allowed actually to be in the area and do face-to-face questionnaires. The key aim in all three protected areas was to do a social impact assessment to capture how people perceive the impact from the protected area, to capture the stated public acceptance and understand how this translates into actual behavior, and understand which are the main factors that explain differentiations between individuals regarding the level of support. So we have here, let's say, a very simple scale from 1 to 5, how much you support the existence of the protected area. The highest score someone could give was 5. All three parks had relatively good scores. And I think that's similar to what was presented in the first presentation in this session. But obviously, there's always room for improvement. So this stated public acceptance is connected. So people who tend to support the parks are also the ones who feel that it is easy for them to use it responsibly, that they are aware of the different regulations within the park, and they are also involved in voluntary activities. So their stated support also translates in actual behavior. When we try to look which factors influence public acceptance, the most important one are their perceptions on the impacts. And income is one of the most important. So for example, when you have a marine protected area, it is very common that fishermen perceive that the park has a significant economic cost for them. But there may be people who are engaged with the tourist sector who consider that there has been a significant benefit. So it's very much based on the individual. So the higher the benefit someone perceives from a park, the more likely is they will support it. Then we have norms, which is something which was mentioned also in the third presentation today. People who tend to have stronger norms about the environment, they believe that we should live, in unity with nature, etc., and with harmony. They're more supportive, again, with environmental values, which was mentioned in the presentation. In these case studies, people who were younger were less supportive of the park, and that's very likely because a lot of young people feel that there are no opportunities and they have to move out of this area in order to find a job. People of higher education are also more positive. Women tend to be more positive, more supportive of the protected areas. And one last factor, which I think is very relevant to this conference, is that the higher level of trust towards the park authority also leads to a higher level of support. So I'm going to focus just on 2 of these explanatory factors. The one is the social impact. So you see here the 3 different parks and how different are the perceptions. And it's interesting because it's not just difference between the different parks, but it's also differences between the individuals within the parks. So you can see, for example, in the Greek case study, the impact on income is negative, basically, and that's very likely because there are a lot of people who are involved in fishing. So, and the park has brought a lot of restrictions to them. But overall, we will say that, at least in the case studies we have in Fidelio, that the impact is a positive one from the parks from the parks to the local communities. When we look at trust in management authorities, you can see again, this is in a 5-point scale, that things are not great. Things can be improved, let's say. And this is a pattern that we see across all of our sites. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the park authority is not doing a good job. It might be linked with other things. And in general, in Europe, we are going through a phase where trust in institutions is low. And that's because we went through a recession, or it might be that things are changing. COVID hasn't helped at all with the trust of the public towards institutions. So that might also reflect that. So why these results may be useful for a park is because we can identify which are the elements, let's say, that can cause people not to support the park or to protest. So, for example, in these cases, we will recommend a very regular social impact assessment. We have parks where basically because they have never done a social impact assessment. They're not, they don't know what are the impacts that the park has on the local communities. And when that is done, then you can capture the negative impact, you can assess it, and you can plan a long-term mitigation measure, which doesn't have to be compensation. It can be something else. But also one thing we notice is that there are a lot of positive impacts for local communities living near parks, and often people are not even aware of them. The opportunities that the park, like sustainable tourism, offer, sometimes people are not very aware of them. Where there are also locals that don't even know that they live within a protected area. So it is important to emphasize the benefits that accompany a new designation. And then regarding the level of trust, definitely we need new information. These parks need new information campaigns, engagement events. People need to know who is behind the management authority, who is making decisions. And one of the things that was mentioned yesterday, that people need also to be facilitators. They don't like just to be told that this, from tomorrow you're not allowed to do this and that. They need to feel that they're part of the decision-making process. In these cases also that it feels like park authorities need to target the younger people, to include them in the decision, to provide, to make new opportunities for them to stay, and possibly to maintain the traditional way of living in a lot of these areas. And that will also help to build some social norms embedded in how these young people grow up, basically. So as a final thing, I would just like to say that we have developed a few tools, so a tool for social impact assessment and public acceptance for European protected areas. And the reason I'm emphasizing Europe is because there are some tools which are, developed across the world, but Europe has also quite a different culture, and Europe is a mosaic of culture. So it's quite important to acknowledge that, not everything fits in one box. So it's important that every tool is adjustable and flexible within a location. The second thing we are involved is a social equity and governance tool, which is an international tool developed led by IAD, and we are testing it in different sites in Europe. And finally, with COVID happening, we have expanded our research in helping parks across Europe to manage overcrowding incidents, and basically to identify which tools will be acceptable by locals. So, and we have a workshop on the 6th of October, which is hosted by EUROPARC. So as a final remark, I would just like to say that there are a variety of factors that can influence public acceptance for protected areas. But Europe is a mosaic of cultures and obviously of ecological systems, and so that don't fit in one box. So one tool cannot solve everything. So it is important that the tools we develop are flexible, are adjustable, and the aim of our project is basically that we develop tools that are then further developed with the park authority in order to benefit and be used in decision-making process. I have put here our details and my personal details and the project website, and I'm looking forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for your inputs, and we see synergies and connection with other interventions we heard before, and interventions we had this morning and yesterday. Is there any question for Nicoletta? See all the hands.
I can see three.
Something on youth.
I can see two questions.
Yes,
the one
please.
from Kaya. Shall I reply? Do we have time?
Yes, please take them. Or Kaya, do you want to?
I think Nicoletta go first, and I think
Nicoletta
that was
goes.
really interesting in like the three presentations. I think almost like the four presentations we had really have a similar theme in there, right? So
Kaya, do you want to ask, or maybe Nicoletta, you want to answer?
Yes, okay. Well, I know Kaya because Matsalu is one of the parks we work, and it's, you know, it's a great collaboration. So I think you're asking, did you compare the proportion of strict protected areas with the acceptance of local people? Do you mean geographically, locally? I don't know, it might be easier if you unmute and I can make sure I answer correctly.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question was, did you compare the proportion of the strict regulated area in the protected area and the acceptance of the local people?
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry. Yes, now I understand. No, there was no, you know, like it's stricter here or stricter or not stricter there. What we have noticed in a different study we did in Greece is that the closer people are in the core of a protected area, not geographically, I mean, in the center, but you know, in the most protected area, the higher the benefits they perceive in their quality of life. But it might be that people have chosen to live in this area because it is exactly closer to the, you know, to the stricter regulations.
Thank you.
And
then there were two questions about the youth not being that supportive or less receptive.
Yeah. Well, that's something that we have also discussed with Kaya for Matsalu, for example, and it seems like something that comes quite often in parks, that young people are concerned. They feel that the park restricts their opportunities. You know, there is tourism, there is sustainable tourism, but they feel there's not much more. House prices are going up because people come into the area and they feel like they're excluded from this. They can't buy a house, they can't stay there. So I think that's where this is coming from. So, you know, sometimes we think young people are more, you know, aware of climate change, biodiversity, but, you know, for them, it's also a matter of, I have to move because the park is here, let's say, in some cases.
And we'll be addressing youth. I'm advertising the workshop number 6 for this afternoon. So we'll be speaking about youth engagement in protected areas, so anyone interested. And just the last 2 points about the 3 sites.
Yes, that's a very good question. That's from Susan from FFI. I haven't, so the 3 sites are quite different. Matsalu is the most, it's recent, not very recent, but you know, it was established after the Peak District. We don't see a difference at the moment. I think once we have all 19 sites, we will be able to, let's make a conclusion whether how mature a park is, whether that helps. In the Peak District, you know, it's part of people's life. It was always there for most people, you know, if someone's 60, basically they have lived with the Peak District. So that's definitely something we will be looking into. Thank you very much for this question.
And the last question about the size of the sample and how to make it relevant, how representative the samples are.
Yes. Okay. Getting a representative sample. If you do face-to-face, in some countries like Germany, it's quite easy because there are lists. The problem in countries which don't have lists of people living. So that's when we do a very specific process where basically we identify the demographics and we try to fill in, let's say, the percentages. But we do like a cluster sampling within each village. But if you want, because we don't have a lot of time, do get in touch directly, and I can explain how we do it, and maybe we can share experiences and ideas.
Okay, I would like to thank you, Nicoletta, and thank also the 3 previous speakers for their time and their passion interventions. I'm sorry I had to be strict with the time, but with the online and lunch coming, it's quite hard. So I just remind you all what's happening next. You're free to go for lunch. We'll display some videos in the meantime, so the session will stay open and you can enjoy some videos in the meantime if you want, and then we'll restart with new links with the workshops. So please check on the program, the workshops. I guess you know which one you registered for. And yes, so those will be starting at 2:30. I hope I don't forget anything major. And so thank you again, and see you later.